Yes. I'm going to come back a little later to some of your spiritual experiences, which I'm very interested in. But before we get there, you mentioned earlier your trip to Indonesia, which is quite recent. And while you were there, you went to the Candi Suku Temple, which is an extraordinary place. And my jaw dropped when I saw you walk around this place because it really is an anomaly. It portrays long-skulled people, such as you might find in ancient Peru, the Paracas skulls, or in Egypt, with the way some of the pharaohs were portrayed, with the false beard that was Egyptian fashion as well. You've got a portrayal of the Ark of the Covenant, it looks like, which is the Hebrew tradition, Hebrew scriptures. You've got a Mayan-style pyramid. I mean, it looks like a religious Disneyland. That it seems to be a theme park of world thought and world religion. That's a lot of cultural knowledge in one place. Now, I was interested to know, what is the date of that place for that knowledge all to have come together? Does it reflect an ancient global culture, or was this simply put together by someone who was very well traveled? What do you make of it? It's an extraordinary place. What do you make of it? So this is absolutely fascinating. I've had electrotherapy myself. Anyone who's read my books knows about all my injuries. And I've been to physiotherapists and they've electrocuted different bits of me. And so I know this ritual from a Western perspective. This is what you do. We put this equipment on you. We'll just run it through you for the next 15 minutes. What's fascinating is that people had this pattern of going to temples. And I think very often we look at that pattern and we oversimplify what's happening. Oh, they're going to worship a deity. They're going to do some devotional act to a deity. But what you found there suggests they might be also going for healing rituals that they expect to be effective. Now, that whole scenario of the battery that you found, that didn't come together by accident. Somebody knew how to put that together. And I'm very intrigued. This date has come up a couple of times already in the conversation when you talk about the age of the temples, about 1,000 to 1,200 years ago. So at that time, it seems like somebody knew how to put one of those together that would have a healing effect. Even if they didn't have technological language for it, they knew how to construct it, and it was technology. So I've got a couple of questions here. People going to temples, are they going for lots of different things, including this kind of healing therapy? And where did the knowledge come from prior to 1,200 years ago?
Yeah, well, today people go to temples for a variety of reasons. A lot of people just go there as a part of their daily or weekly routine. There are many devout Hindus. Like I said, we got like 1 billion pagans, if you will. From the Western perspective, we got 1 billion pagans still left who are actively involved in all these rituals. There are a lot of sick people who are going to get healed. There are a lot of quote unquote, like kind of mentally sick, like they're depressed. They may be going through some problems and they're going to the temples. And they usually follow a ritual that will be like, okay, so if you come here and then worship this deity for the next 40 days, you'll be healed, right? Well, I mean, sometimes it's just common sense. If the person is obese, and they'd be like, okay, just go to this temple on top of the mountain every day, and then and then go around the temple for like 9 times. I mean,
notice the difference.
I think it would probably what my fitness trainer would tell me, right? Just go on top of the mountain.
It makes sense.
Yeah, so a lot of this is also masked in the name of rituals, and it works better because even if your doctor tells you may skip a couple of sessions, but if you're really devout, you may not skip any session at all. So it works really well.
Yes.
So so people go to these temples for a lot of reasons. We have understood some parts of it. Some of this is pure superstition, and don't think I'm just masking everything, saying that okay, everything that these people are doing is right. I'm not saying that. I'm not at all saying that. There's definitely some superstition there which may have been added on later in the past few centuries, but there is a lot of rituals which are also there which actually help us a lot. The
Yes.
real problem is to separate both of them because we don't understand which one is helpful and which one is harming us. And that's where we are. India is having a lot of these beliefs and things. We don't know like what is what, and a lot of it is mentioned in ancient texts. A lot of it is also not mentioned in ancient texts.
Yes.
So
Yes. So there's tradition that isn't written down, but that has been maintained nevertheless for a long time.
absolutely, lots of traditions are not written down, and we follow them. I mean, weird tradition, like it just really strange. The thing is, like, we're not supposed to cut down trees. This is really weird. Like the thing is, trees are gods for us, actually. So we're not actually supposed to cut down trees. From face value, it just seems really simple. Like we're not supposed to cut down trees. Like how do you make all the furniture and stuff like that? But until the last 50 years ago, when people didn't do it, when people thought that okay, so trees are gods, let's not harm the gods, kind of things. India was much greener, you know. But once we got like quote unquote civilized and said, okay, these are just trees, let's cut them. The deforestation is just going insane. The amount of deforestation, the amount of trees, because people just became completely reckless, right? It must have been the belief that kept them on a leash, because they just went completely nuts. And now the deforestation is just crazy. We lost a bunch of trees. We lost a significant portion of the trees in the last 50 years.
Yes. Something that crops up in sacred spaces around the world, cathedrals and temples alike, is cymatic patterns. And you can see them built into stained glass windows. You can see them designed as mandalas. And cymatic patterns, for anyone who doesn't know, are the patterns generated by sound waves. And you find them in Hindu temples. What is their meaning in that context? What is their function?
In ancient Hindu temples, in the ceilings, especially on top of the main deity, you'll see these large circular patterns, like elaborately carved with a variety of details. And each one is different, and I call them cymatic patterns. We don't actually have a real name for it, but the thing is, I think these are visual images of a certain sound. And we know that, like, everything that we talk about, like today we're talking, and what we're basically doing is just throwing some sound, and we're able to kind of translate that sound into meanings, and then we're communicating between each other. But if we just take that pure sound, and it can be represented visually, and all the sounds that we say, all like the wind blowing, or the mantras like Om that we use in Hindus, everything comes to like a nice circular pattern with a lot of like designs inside. So we see these elaborate carvings, and they look very similar. They look similar to propellers. They look similar to the Iron Man's arc reactor. But these are all cymatic patterns. But we're not able to reverse engineer that. We don't know what that visual. We think that visual is a cymatic pattern of a specific sound, but we're not able to go back to that sound from that visual. Okay, we're able to do the opposite. I myself have a I forgot the name of it. I myself have a machine where we actually chant the mantras, and it has like a it's called a Cladni plate. That's what it's called. I have a plate, and then I sprinkle some water, some salt on it, and then we chant the mantras in our group, and then we can see the cymatic patterns. Okay, so we're able to do the opposite. We're able to make these sounds, and we're able to look at the visual representation of that sound. And now we have hooked it up to certain frequency devices, and we put like a certain frequency, and we're able to see how that frequency looks on the Cladni plate. But we're not able to do the opposite. We're not able to see, okay, so this cymatic pattern on the ceiling corresponds to this mantra or this sound. We're not there yet. But maybe in the next 10 to 20 years, we'll be able to reverse engineer that and say, okay, so this temple is dedicated to this mantra, which means this. And that temple is dedicated to this mantra, which means that. Okay? And in Hindu texts, this is what happens, right? So let's say you go there with like a chronic cold. They will give you a specific mantra to chant for a certain time. If you go there with depression, they'll give you a different mantra, right? So I think these temples were built for specific reasons. I think, for example, the Sikh people would go to a certain temple. The people who had like broken relationships all the time, they should go to other temple, this kind of stuff, because the temples had that essence of that mantra.
I want to suggest also, you've found such wonderful treasures in your documentaries, and not only have you found portrayals of technology, but you found actual pieces of technology. And one that I really enjoyed hearing you explain was the name of the temple, I think, is Chandi Kimpulan, and you found the buried remains of a piece of technology that appears to be for the purpose of generating electricity. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So we went to Indonesia about 3 months ago, and we were in Indonesia. We were actually in Central Java for about 3 weeks, and we were analyzing a couple of temples there. One of them is a small, nice little Hindu temple, and it has a very interesting story behind it. Actually, there is this great university called the Islamic University of Indonesia, and 20 years ago, they were trying to build a new library, and they started, the construction workers started to dig for a foundation. But surprisingly, they found something buried inside, and when they started to dig those things up, a Hindu temple started to come out. And archaeologists confirmed that this temple is about 1,200 years ago. So this is a very ancient temple. And the archaeology report gets very, very interesting. So they had things buried under the base of the lingam, and they also had things buried between the lingam and the base. Now, what's really interesting is that I looked at the archaeology report. I started to recreate what they found in the temple. So they would say, okay, we found pieces of silver here. So I would go and buy pieces of silver. And they said, okay, they found like golden foils there. So I actually went there and got golden foils and iron and copper and all that stuff. Now it's very, very interesting to me because the archaeology report done by the government of Indonesia actually says we found a copper wire. This is strange because you don't see this kind of evidence, coming out of other places. But they have clearly said this is a copper wire. I mean, what else do you use a copper wire for? This is for electricity. So I started to put those things together, and I recreated the whole setup. I built a small little lingam, I built a pot, and the same pot was found in Chandikimplan, and they filled it with husk, which was used as a placeholder for things. In India, we still use it. In India, if we want something to be held in place, we put husk and we pour water on top of it. So because it just holds it in that place forever, nothing happens to it. Think about it. It's really interesting, right? Husk is organic, right? But it's still intact for 1,200 years in Indonesia, buried, right? Nothing happened to it. So it's some really interesting material. So I started to put those things together, and I put a silver plate and an iron plate in that husk, and I put it in that pot, and I put it in front of the lingam, and I poured water on top of the lingam, just like what any Hindu would do, even today. This is an ongoing practice. We always pour water on top of the lingam. And when we checked it with a voltmeter, we realized that this produces electricity. The ions move from one metal to another, and we are producing more than 0.5 volts of electricity. And it was really shocking to me. And then I realized that these ancient boulders there were actually generating electricity, which is evident because I recreated the same setup, and they even had copper wires. But what did they use this electricity for? Were they lighting up light bulbs or like doing something else with it? But then I realized how Hindus do these rituals, right? They would put their hands in the pot, right? And then I started to go and read online about electrotherapy. It's very interesting because Benjamin Franklin, who is one of the founding fathers of the United States, also talks about a similar procedure. He called it the electric bath. So these people, again, use the same technology. They used 2 electrodes, and they just sent some low volt or low amp electricity into the water, and humans were supposed to put their hands, or if you had, for example, if you had pain in your feet, you just put your feet in that bathtub, right? And this is exactly what ancient Hindus were doing 1,200 years ago. And we don't know if they fully understood this, by the way, right? But what would, even in India, this is very common. If you come to India, if somebody has this, let's say he had chronic hand pain, right? So instead of going to the doctor and taking all the pills and getting all the side effects and all that stuff, these people actually go to these temples and they pour water on the lingam and they put their hands in that pot, right? Actually getting electrotherapy. And the thing is, all these, like, for example, if you go to a doctor today, if you go to a physiotherapist, he would be like, okay, come for like 12 sessions, come for 25 sessions. Like, you have to come for the next 25 days and get electrotherapy. But ancient Hindus masked it in the name of ritual. They'd be like, okay, you cannot miss even one day. You have to come here for the next 40 days and put your hand in this pot to get the healing power of the lingam.
Yes. I'm really interested to see where that kind of research goes, because I believe there are many sacred spaces in the East and the West that were really places for sound healing. And the spaces had been designed to resonate at particular frequencies for particular kinds of healing experience. It's just a speculation on my part, but I have been to places where you walk into the space and you think, I just want to stay here. There's something about the energy in this room that I just want to sit in. I'm sure you've had that experience as well with all the temples that you visited.
Yes. One thing about the real ancient temples, when I mean ancient in India, I'm specifically talking about temples which are older than, let's say, about 600 years, So if you go to those temples, it's very hard for you to hold a negative thought. I've experimented with this. You could be having a bad day, you could be upset about somebody or something, And then when you enter the temple, you're still holding it, but as you go towards the central chamber, it just leaves you completely. And you can spend like an hour, 2 hours inside the temple, and you just completely forget that negative thought. It's very hard for you to go and sit in a temple and like plan a murder. Like it's just impossible. Because there I think, and I think this is fascinating because we don't understand how they achieved that. They must have achieved that with something else. You don't have to be a Hindu. You don't even have to be a theist. You can be an atheist, right?
Yes.
You don't have to believe in God. And if you still walk through that ancient Hindu temple, the modern Hindu temples have just dropped that concept. They don't know why they're building it, right? The modern Hindu temples have completely like not understood that. But in ancient Hindu temples, they put certain materials. For example, the walls were usually made of granite, but the central statue was never made of granite, never. So and the walls and the outer chambers of the temple will have carvings and everything, but the inner chamber has nothing. It's just completely empty, and it's built up, and they built acoustics in a certain way. So as you're moving towards the central chamber, so you just slowly drop all your negative energy, and you're going there, right? And they put a lot of things inside, and we have only understood some parts of this because they would do these elaborate rituals, right? They put like a giant lingam made of like shiny black rock, which they go to like the river Ganga, which is like far away, and they get this piece of rock and they polish it. But before planting it in the ground, they would put like gold and silver and like all the diamonds and everything inside. So they must have tried to do something there, which we don't understand, right? But what we do understand is that it works. I don't know how it works. Right? I don't know how it works, but if you're having a bad day, if you are in India and if you had a bad day, you can just go to these ancient sites and you just forget about everything and you like completely cleanse your mind and get rid of all these negative thoughts. We know that it works, but we just don't know why it works or how it works.
So it turns out there was a lot of sense in the ancient wisdom.
Yes.
And maybe the explanation had been short, but there was a lot of wisdom in it. I notice many of the temples you walk around, you are barefoot because they're considered sacred spaces. And then a couple I've noticed you wandering around in trainers. So what's happened to the temples where you're allowed to wear trainers? Are they not working temples anymore?
Yeah, so most of the times it's not something that's enforced by others. What I do is that when I go to a temple, I see if it is a living temple, meaning that is the main statue in the central chamber intact. Okay, if it's not intact, we don't have to. If it's destroyed, it's not a living temple. So I would probably put on my shoes and do all the research. Sometimes it's really hard. Most of the times I would remove my shoes. I like to do this almost in all temples, not to put my shoes on, because I myself I'm a Hindu. I'm a devout Hindu, and we also have a lot of people who are watching who are also devout Hindus. We certainly don't want to hurt their sentiments, but sometimes the temples are. It's impossible not to wear shoes. A lot of people think, okay, go to Angkor Wat, but don't wear shoes. Angkor Wat is like 3 times the football field in the U.S. Okay, it's bigger than the Vatican City, I think. Okay, so I'm not gonna be walking for like the whole day without shoes. Okay. So sometimes we use common sense. Sometimes we have to go on top of the temples. We try to restore them. Sometimes there are thorns. Sometimes there are, like places that you do have to wear shoes. The authorities say, look, in Indonesia, sometimes the authorities will say, look, you have to wear shoes, and only then we'll let you in, right? It's like no
Yes,
shoes, no service type of stuff. So
yes,
sometimes
yes.
I do. Yeah, but mostly I don't like to put on my shoes, but if necessary, I will wear my shoes.